Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick comparison between the Sony A6300 on the left and the A6500 on the right. So these are two very similar aps-c mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras from Sony. Both are very good. I'll let you know that right out of the gate. And if you own an A6300, I will tell you I do not think personally it's worth making the jump to the A6500, but that really is going to be a case-by-case basis for users because the price difference for some of you, if you're all about action shooting, so sports, motorsports, cars, birds in flight, anything like that, then the difference in buffer between these two cameras is really a critical enough feature, I think, to push users towards the newer A6500. But let's start off with pricing. I just wanted to let all of you know out of the gate my thoughts on upgrading from the A6300 to the A6500. Wouldn't do it unless you find the elements I'm about to talk about to be critical. But otherwise, if you're fresh money deciding on one of these, the A6500 is hands down the way to go. So the A6300 on the left, which has the kit zoom on it right now, the 16 to 50 power zoom, which is not a great lens, but certainly fine for starters, and does keep the profile really low. You're looking at 1,100 or maybe 1,000 on sale these days. You've got great 4K video. You do not have the 5-axis image stabilization that you'll find in the newer A6500. So that's something to keep or bear in mind for those of you that do want to use this primarily for video, as well as use alternative glass mounted on this, not E-mount or FE lenses, full frame E-mount lenses. It does have high frequency recording. You can do 120 frames per second, but you will be doing that in post, something the A6500 can do on the fly. So that's another thing, an advantage that the A6500 has. Also, the A6300 does not have a touch screen. So exactly the same screen, exactly the same OLED viewfinder, but you do not have the touch screen capability. So for those of you that matters, that's also a big one. But again, the most critical one that I was mentioning earlier really is all about that buffer. And essentially what that equates to is these are both fantastic performers when it comes to autofocus, that 4D autofocus that they have. The A6500 a little bit faster than the A6300, but marginal in my experience. But that buffer will permit you with the A6500 to shoot over 300 images continuously as long as your SD card permits it. So that is a pretty big difference depending on your photography style. What do you shoot? So that's why I said at the top of my video, if you are someone that is after action in any form, as odd as that may sound in a camera review, then the A6500 is by far and away the winner, even though it starts at $1,400 body alone. Again, $1,100 was the kit here. $1,400 is just the body of the A6500. But you do get that touchscreen, same range of motion, same display quality, but now you have a touchscreen to work with, which for some of you is what you've been waiting for. Same OLED electronic viewfinder, same hot shoes, same location of your flash. The E-mount clasp is a little bit different. In my experience, it seems a little bit tighter than the one on the A6300, but they are designed exactly the same. And the bodies, as you may have noticed, look almost identical. The A6500 does feel a little bit heavier, but I think they are precisely the same weight, if I'm not mistaken. And again, this is all about the buffer and the 5-axis image stabilization for both video and still, you're gaining some steps. In terms of the processor, 24.3 or whatever it is, megapixels and change. Not really a big difference there. So this isn't about the sensor as much as it is the hardware on the inside. Just like the Wi-Fi, NFC, and battery performance, no real bump up there either. In fact, I think the A6500 has been consuming a little bit more battery life, but that's because it's got more going on inside. But that's, in the use I've had with it so far. But by far and away, the A6500 for the price difference is the better purchase if you're putting fresh money into an E-mount system. Starter body, especially if you want the hybrid experience. The A6300, as it goes down in price, will become even more desirable. Again, upgrading from the 63 to the 65 really boils down to, do you need that 5-axis image stabilization, and do you need the buffer? I won't even include the touchscreen because I think that's really more of a personal preference than a necessity, but of course many of you may feel otherwise. But that, in my opinion, that's a matter of personal preference. The other features are kind of live or die by necessities depending on your type of work or what your hobby calls for. So for me, the A6500 by far and away is the better choice. But again, if you have the A6300, it really depends on what type of shooter you are, as I've been mentioning through the course of this video. But both are great cameras. As you can see, again, form factor, pretty much identical. It's just a matter of more money on the right side than the left, and also the A6500 being the latest E-mount body. The 6300 obviously was the latest until this rolled out, but the touchscreen, my experience, has been good. It definitely has its advantages, a little bit of a menu revamp, but more about what it looks like, cosmetic, than actually physical. All of the buttons are pretty much laid out exactly the same, as you can see right here. No real deviation. So that's another thing to take into account. If you're expecting a difference in button layout, don't be surprised. These are, again, incredibly similar cameras. They handle the same. If you're going to put full frame glass on here, it's going to be cropped because you don't have a full frame sensor. Although I do recommend buying full frame glass, even though we're looking at two native aps-c E-mount pieces of glass. This is the 10 to 18 f4, which is still one of my favorites. For those of you unaware, all of my gear was destroyed by Hurricane Matthew along with my home. So I've been slowly reaccumulating gear, getting back into the mix. And that's why I can tell you right now, I already had the experience with the 6300, but the 6500 just blows me away. It makes me think about leaving my A7R Mark II behind. So that just gives you an idea of how good the A6500 really is. Now, from a balance perspective, I was mentioning the FE lenses before. I think they're a better overall investment because, quite frankly, Sony's investing more in FE lenses. We're not seeing a whole lot of new E-mount aps-c lenses, but full-frame E-mount, Sony has been on a roll, and we've got more in the pipeline. I don't have inside information, but it's logical. That's where Sony sees the numbers and sees a shift going. Hopefully the A6500 changes that trend. I wish we had a great telephoto option, but the 70 to 300 full frame is a pretty solid choice for this. But again, your balance, the weight distribution is going to just be a mess, and that's where something like the A7R Mark II, anything in the full frame realm, is going to be a far better balance unless you're tripoding it or monopoding it everywhere you go or using some sort of bracing system. But at the end of the day, both of these cameras are great choices. I can tell you that without hesitation. Money well spent. And the E-mount lineup really has grown. For those of you that are new to Sony and look at it and say, well, they don't have a lot of lenses, you should only know how things started. And anyone who is a veteran of Sony's DI and how it's built up, I'll just say over the last 5 years, then you know how far we've really come. Granted, again, a lot of that shift in focus has gone to full frame, but there's a reason. That's where Sony's breaking into a whole new territory and really tapping into the pro market more so than the hobbyist, the enthusiast market, which is still drawn, for some odd reason, to larger cameras, equating that with better, more quality, that isn't necessarily there. And that's exactly what both of these cameras are shining examples of, because they do outperform much of the much larger competition or competing models. So both the A6300 and A6500, golden as far as I'm concerned, but as I've reiterated, the 6500 beats the 6300 in just about every way imaginable. So if budget is not an issue, that even applies to the upgraders out there. Even though I prefaced this video at the top by saying, there are make or break features there for some of you. If budget's not an issue, clearly the 6500 is the way to go. And if you can wait and you're really thinking about, should I go full frame, I would wait, because Obviously, what has been brought to the 6500 is going to make an appearance in the form of a full frame variant of some sort. I have, again, no information to share. Wish I did. I'm not on the inside, folks. I'm like you, on the outside, using the gear just like every other customer. But it's just very clear that the A7R Mark II and A7S Mark II haven't been replaced. They likely will, and if not even, we may see, as rumored, a higher-end model. So there's a whole lot of room for improvement in what Sony could do with full frame, and that's, again, why I recommend sticking with full-frame glass, even if you're drawn to the smaller form factor, which was personally what I always loved about Sony's E-mount and their digital imaging offerings, was that they were giving you great hybrid, still and video performance, and on top of all of that, doing it in the smallest package available. I mean, this is the type of camera that you could throw in a cargo pant. I've done it before, and you just can't do that with cameras that produce this sort of quality other than the A6500. I challenge you to show me a single offering that you could literally fit in a cargo pant pocket. And if you're traveling, that's a traveler's dream. I mean, I love the RX-10 Mark III. I still think that's one of the best bridge cameras, not to go off on a tangent, that can kind of wear every hat needed for just about any class photographer, unless they're doing print work, obviously, professional grade stuff, but even photo, video journalists could work with the RX-10 Mark III, but they could also work with these cameras. Now, overheating, I didn't really touch on. Both had, the A6300 was quite controversial because there were a lot of reviewers out there who had early access. I won't name names, who said they had no overheating. I initially didn't, but then through the course of more use did encounter overheating. Sony addressed that with firmware. It's still not a rock, certainly better than it was. The A6500, I have not seen overheating issues. Remember, video is capped at 29 minutes, 59 seconds. That is because this is classified as a still and not a video camera, but I can tell you right now, both of these provide some of the best video I've ever seen. And for those of you, wondering about rolling shutter and distortion, I mean, if you don't brace yourself well, even with the 5-axis image stabilization, yes, quick movement, you're going to see it. Nature of the beast with just about every camera of this kind. So I'm kind of sick of hearing about people saying, oh, how bad is the rolling shutter? Welcome to the real world. Rolling shutter is and always will be, at least for the time being, an issue. And as long as you don't pan like a maniac, you're probably going to fare relatively well. However, if you're going to, I see these tests done where a person just goes back and forth, like a cat's head following a laser, then you're going to end up with rolling shutter. I mean, it's fairly obvious. If you're going to bounce back, I mean, who even films like that? So those sorts of tests are foolish, and of course, they're going to show flaws, not in the camera's design, but the actual capabilities of the DI world, realistically speaking, no matter what camera you're bringing to the table. But neither are perfect, but the A6500 is damn close. But that pretty much rounds things out. So both are great. Of course, you already know the A6500 is the camera to beat right now. A6300 on a budget, definitely a very attractive option. So you won't go wrong either way. It's just about budget and what you need. Hopefully I've answered a lot of those questions through the course of this video. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.